Are you ready?
Yes,
Yes.
we are ready.
Are you ready to listen? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr.Sam Osmanagich. I'm a pyramid and megalithic sites researcher. I have a privilege, and I'm really very pleased and humbled that I'm a co-host to the international group of explorers coming from 12 countries, and co-hosting this group with my esteemed colleague, investigator of ancient sites, and my good friend, Michael Tellinger of South Africa. Today we are at one of the most important places on the planet. The first sight, you would say, these are just medieval ruins, castles or fortresses. There are hundreds of them in Austria, France, Switzerland, even Bosnia. However, let's not be so quick on conclusions. This place is the most important monumental site, not only in Zimbabwe, but also in the southern part of African continent. It can be equaled only with the huge structures in northern Ethiopia, northern Sudan, and of course, most of the Egyptian soil. We are the great Zimbabwe. In 1980, this country changed its name from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe, mostly thanks to this site right here. Mud Zimbabwe is the name for approximately 300 ancient ruins made from the dry stone walls scattered all around the country. However, this is the most impressive site. We are inside so-called Great Enclosure. What is Mud Zimbabwe? What is the Zimbabwe? According to some very simplified views, it is the stone house, or even the court. However, if we go a little bit more back in time, we will realize that the name actually meant venerated place, sacred place, respected place. This is the largest ruin within the complex. Complex we can divide into three different sites. The first site, ancient hill ruins, and great enclosure, and lower ruins. When we think about the age, on one hand we have conventional theories made by archaeologists and historians, led by, of course, British elites in the last 150 years, telling us that this site was a seat of the local monarch, local king, roughly from the 12th to the middle of the 15th century, 1450. And then the kingdom, because of the conquerors from the north, moved to the west, to what's known as Kami or Kame ruins, in southwestern part of the country. Right now we are in southeastern part of the country. And then from 1450, Kame became the headquarters of the capital of the kingdom. It all sounds rather logical, and when we see the style, using those granite bricks, or granite plates, it's identical. However, the truth is a little bit different. The oldest site in this complex is what is called ancient hills, ancient hill ruins. There we can see the first phase in the history of this era. And that was time before all known people, much before Bantu, much before Shona people, because what we can see there are huge granite boulders. It's not only the granite bedrock, but we can see on the top of the huge blocks, roughly rounded and smooth, surfaced granite boulders between 100 and 400 tons. Since there is nothing above, this is not a result of big blocks, big boulders rolling down the hill. Also, it is not a matter of the erosion. Several of these big blocks have been placed there, and several of them do fulfill the criteria to be called balancing rocks. They have only 2 or 3 points of support. So now we are dealing with the civilization that we are able to move, to lift, and to place huge granite boulders, and there has to be a reason for that. The second phase is the phase when the builders came and they were adding these dry stone walls to the first ancient hill. We can see a series of passageways. We don't see buildings, series of passageways and enclosures. And this belongs to that second phase. The third phase, of course, is the phase of the known settlers coming from the north, because both Bantu and before them some people came from the north to this area. And they were using it, and they were doing their stuff. They were having their inferior huts, little houses living here. Always when we think about the area where there are no documents, the most important thing is the first, in most cases, white settlers, Spanish, Portuguese, later on British, Dutch, who were writing in their chronicles about the first meetings with those people. Great Zimbabwe was first visited by João de Boras, a Portuguese, who came here in 1536. Since he was not convict like his predecessor, Antonio Fernandez, a couple of decades before that, who, by the way, was crossing the area just 5 kilometers north from here, but he never visited the place. João wrote about his first meeting with the indigenous people. He asked them, since they lived here, if they had in their oral tradition information who built this. The answer was no. He asked them about how it was built. They didn't know. He asked them about the purpose. They did not know. What does it remind us of? The same scenario in Central America around the same time, when this time Spanish people are coming to the countries of Mexico, Guatemala, later on Honduras, El Salvador, and Belize, and they are meeting with indigenous people who were living in less than 5% of the so-called Mayan ruins. They asked those people if they knew who built those beautiful pyramids and megalithic sites. The answer was always no. As a matter of fact, what we call today Mayan civilization, we do not know their real name. Because in the 10th century, the great civilization, who built more than 100,000 pyramids, who built hundreds of thousands of different structures, terraces, pyramidal terraces, bridges, roads, temples, and so on. We know nothing about them because they are gone. Only 250 years later, Indians from northern Mexico were coming to the area, inhabited some of those structures which were not completely overgrown by the jungle. So they did not know who built them. The same scenario here. So when he spoke to the indigenous people about the structure, he concluded these people did not have art of writing, construction, tooling to build something like this. And no wonder that they consider this complex work of devil. Because no man from their tradition could not build something like this. After Portuguese were gone, for 220 years, this place was forgotten. And then, of course, British, German, and French explorers, traders started coming to the area. A little bit before that, we have Arabs who are getting some people from here for the slave trade, taking them to the east. And the biggest trade center for the slaves was, of course, Zanzibar. So the British and Germans started exploring this area, and they could not imagine who really built this place. Many romantic theories. One of them, the famous German explorer Klaus Manch, was that this had something to do with the King Solomon's first temple, because it was something on such a large scale here in the center of the Black Africa. So, King Solomon, and secondly, Queen Sheba. Queen Sheba, or Queen Saba, or Queen of Saba, of course, in a lot of traditions, was assigned to Ethiopia, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, but she was always linked to the huge quantities of gold. Our good friend Michael Tellinger, rightfully talking about the gold through different eras, going back not for a couple of 1,000 years, but much longer in the past. That probably most precious element on this planet could be found in abundance in Central African countries, in South Africa, and to the north all the way going to Sudan and Ethiopia. But here, in what is today Zimbabwe, with the several gold mines, in the past, the traces of 600 gold mines were discovered. Now we are talking about millions of kilos of gold that was mined from this area. And of course, the trading relations between the Central Africa and Eastern Africa and Northern Africa was very developed. What we know from the archaeological digging in the area is that this trading was actually going even far back to the other continents. A lot of ceramics, a lot of golden ornaments, a lot of copper ornaments, a lot of iron ornaments. One of the most interesting, of course, was the cartouche, like the one I have here, which, according to some archaeologists from 19th century, especially Petrie, belonged to Thutmose III. Thutmose III belonged to the New Kingdom in Egypt. So in Egypt, we have the era before the dynasty, pre-dynastic, Old Kingdom, Intermediate period, Middle Kingdom, Intermediate, New Kingdom. New Kingdom starts with the 18th dynasty, and Thutmose III was a part of the 18th dynasty, and 19, which is celebrated like the most magnificent 19th dynasty, started with Seti I. Then, of course, we have Ramesses II, Ramesses III, all the way to Ramesses XI, Ramesses II, the most successful. That's how we are told, Egyptian pharaohs. Well, Thutmose III belonged to that period of revival of Egyptian state, when they started a lot of connection, including trading connection, with all different parts of the known world. So when Petrie saw that cartouche in the 19th century, he was very excited, thinking that there was a trading between Central African countries and Egypt. Later on, there were some other references to this cartouche stating that this was a forgery. When it was forged during the Ptolemaic era, the era of the ancient Greek kings or pharaohs. This is about 2,000, 2,200, 2,300 years back, when the headquarters was in Alexandria, and from there they were traveling most of the known world. So we got pieces from Egypt, we got pieces from India, we got pieces from Sri Lanka, we got even pieces from Malaysia, we had of course from Saudi Arabia. So that was intensive trade between this known section of the world. However, let's go a little bit back. This is what's the recent times. Let's talk about the origin. In the 19th century, when British ruled most of the world, this is really something that amused them. They could not really find the answers. All they could see here in Central Africa were the blacks, the Bantu. And they were giving directions to their museum curators, archaeologists, and historians. Not even to mention as the hypothesis that this was made by the black Africans. Very racist. They were saying, say it was built by the Arabs, by white settlers, by Chinese, but don't you ever say that it was built by the black Africans. Now, even though I would say even today in 21st century, we do not know who built it. Also the archaeologists, they have agreement it was built by Shona people. We do not know who really built it. Why am I saying that? This was not a fortification. This was not a fortress. What we have here in the case of the Great Enclosure is this wall, which runs approximately 250 meters in circumference. 250 meters. The height reaching 11 meters. Some places 7 meters, some places have been heavily damaged. 7 to 11 meters, and you would say probably 11 meters was the original height. Thickness, 2.5, 3, most places 4 meters thick. So it's extremely solid. Shape is almost perfectly circular. Not perfect, but almost perfectly circular. Now let's do a little calculation. So we have 250 meters the length of the wall. 3 to 4 meters thick. Let's take 4 meters. So it's about 1,000 square meters. When we add the height, 11, let's use 10 meters. So 100, so it's about 12 to 1,500 cubic meters. When we take the hardness, the specific weight, 2.9 to 3 for granite, it's more than 35,000 tons. In order to build this huge wall, 35,000 tons of materials. What did they use as the material? They use those granite, let's call them bricks. They look like a brick. They're all of different sizes, different shapes. They are mostly rectangular sizes. They go and the mass from 3, 5, 10, 20 kilos. So they are rather easy to manipulate. So 35,000 tons. I calculated also how many total pieces they would need. They would need 13 million pieces to make just the outside wall. 13 million. When we add the inner walls, it is about 70,000 tons. The structure tension hills 65,000 tons. So what we have here are tens of millions of pieces. They don't look very much, but they are granite, one of the hardest material in the nature. Official story is what they were doing. They were using high temperature to break them. Well, I could imagine that they were using high temperature because one of my measurements, when I was measuring the moisture in the granite, was showing me values from 1.3 to 2.0. When you go to granite, natural granite pieces, they are from 2 to 3. Why? Because the surface is weathered. It has more moisture. So now I know that they removed the surface to get better quality blocks. Less moisture, more durable. And a few words about the measurement. Life Energy, it kind of disappointed me My home 20% on the scale from 0 to 100, here 10%. Life energy of the blocks about 30%, which is less than, for example, Adam's calendar, which is 40%. K2 block in Bosnia, 45%. Oxygen, 20.9, no bad gases. Magnetic field, 19 to 34, little bit anomaly comparing to our homes or cities. Ultrasound, very quiet, 19 to 21 kilohertz, with one occasional spikes, meaning something is happening from time to time. Infrasound, most of the time no signal, very, very quiet. But what really caught my attention, amazing results on a negative and positive ions. It's negative and positive charge. Negative ions are in the range from 100,000 to 450,000. These are not results you can find anywhere. Results in the Bosnian pyramid tunnels, the biggest I've ever measured, 120,000. Our homes, 50 to 100, cities, 200, hills, 1,000, here, from 100,000 to 400,000. Yeah. Something is happening here that is releasing so much of negative ions, but at the same time of the positive ions. So when we think about the purpose of the structure, no fortification, no living at the original time, somebody over there knew the property of the granite. The content of a quartz crystal is very high, quartz crystal. You put on top of it another one with this mechanical pressure. What you are doing, you are transforming through the piezoelectrical effect energy from one form to another. For example, if you have electromagnetism hitting the quartz crystal, you are getting ultrasound. If you have mechanical push, like one on top of each other, you are getting electricity. Our barbecues, you hit the button behind this quartz crystal, so you have mechanical pressure, and results electricity. And the barbecue starts burning, because electricity in the connection with the gas starts burning. So I would say, probably they knew the secret. Granite, and then you have this movement of the energy, most probably electricity or electromagnetism. There are several tunnels in the area. There are several water flows in the area. The water moves, it charges the whole energetical process. Is it possible that this was an energy machine? It is possible. Is it possible that they had some devices to start the whole process or to amplify the whole process? It is possible. The shape, circular is one of the most powerful shapes. Pyramidal, conical, and circular, because circular shape focuses the energy. Conical shape is making the energy beam going through the top. The pyramid shapes, pyramid beams. So they knew some secrets of the energy movement. I would say they needed some additional technology, but even without it, you can see that the site is still energetically active. Another huge secret of the past. So let's not focus only on the last period of few hundred years. We need to go much back, further in the past. We need to try to learn from the ancients, because they had the key for free and clean energy.
Bravo.